How's it going, everyone? So we are finally moving on to our third and final part here, the inside of the typewriter. So this guy comes with his own perks and I guess kind of low points. So as you can see, with this guy, I haven't really masked him out into different groups because, as I explained before, the ID mask baking on this guy was giving me some problems. So I just sort of went ahead and decided that we can just sort of mask this one inside a paint or without it. Really shouldn't be a big deal. We'll just sort of go through piece by piece. But the sort of benefit to this guy is we don't have any parts with text or decals. Like both the keys and the frame had that kind of all over the place. So with this guy, we can just sort of cut to the chase and focus on getting stuff done. So with that being said, let's go ahead and do that. I think I want to start on all the pieces that kind of have this dotted, rusty silver to it. It seems to be all the bars, these front pieces, the sides, this cover here. And we can actually cover quite a bit with just that material there. And lucky for us, this seems to be the same material we set up for these guys here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just straight up copy that. So we have that in our frame layer. And these guys, I actually turned them all down to 1K just because we're not going to be using them directly. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that makes it use a little bit less RAM, and I'm really trying to avoid any more crashes for this scene. We'll go ahead and let this save, but yeah, I'm just turning it down so that we don't have any crashes. I've done a little bit of brushing up here and there on some of the masks between episodes, and even when I'm not recording, there's just, well, so much stuff going on. There's so many different layers, so many different masks, smart materials, groups, and things of the sort. And if it's all at 4K, it is quite a bit to sort of handle all at once. So I've gone ahead and just sort of cranked that down, and hopefully moving forward we should have just a little bit less crashes, and then we can turn it up as we export it. But yeah, let's just let this finish up, and there we go. So if I'm not mistaken, this metal here, we called it something, it was under metal misc, and I think it's the ends layer. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. We can then dive back to the inside, and we'll turn off the frame for now. And we have this guy at 4K, all of our maps plugged in, minus the ID. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit Control V to paste this in. It's going to apply to everything, and then we're just going to have to mask it out manually without a color selector, but honestly that shouldn't take too much time. So, not too worried about that. Okay, so this is obviously a very extreme version of what we're going for. The first thing I want to do is we have a mask here. I'm going to add a black mask. We're going to want to just sort of isolate areas. So all of these bars, this T area, the side, this, just trying to find similar things. So I'm going to start down here. And it's tricky because we are picking up these bolts, so we're going to have to find a way to mask them out at some point. But that shouldn't be the hardest thing in the world. Getting all this stuff. I'm going to grab these top bars, but I'm not going to grab these. I'm going to give them their own thing most likely. Let's continue this all the way to the end. Same with this, and yeah, you can see why sort of having a automated color selector is a little bit better for something like this, especially for masking out the bolts, but not too much we can do about that at this point. Just going to continue to select this stuff. This hook was included in that, not that little guy though. Include that. This part as well. Just making sure we're not missing anything. We have this guy, and it seems that this sort of hook piece also falls into the category of the same material. Okay. Grab that back bar. We know that this is part of it. Just making sure we get all of it. That guy. This, I feel like I might want to make that different. Let's go ahead and check our reference for the back. Yeah, this seems to be slightly different, so I'm going to keep that unmasked. We'll pick up this guy. Grab this. This one is painted, so we're not going to touch that. That might be all for now. I think these side pieces will also kind of fall into the same category. Okay, those guys are sharing UVs, so it duped over. A lot of this stuff is sharing UVs, so it might actually be a lot quicker than the other parts. This is part of something else. Okay, cool. What I'm going to do now is add a paint layer, and we're going to sort of mask it where all the screws are. So we're just going to be using a standard brush with our hardness all the way up. And I'm just going to manually turn this to 0 and straight up just sort of stamp out, which isn't the most effective way to do this, but we don't want any materials kind of like grabbing the height from this group and bringing it into the group where the screws are. We want these to be separate things. So I'm going to turn my hardness all the way up, affect the radius so it's like cutting into it a little bit, and then just stamping it out. And we'll just, we'll try our best to do this. Obviously it's a little bit more tricky when we can't see all the exact locations of all the screws or anything like that automatically. But we can always, of course, come back and fix it because it's just a mask, right? And yeah, as soon as we're done doing this, we can actually start affecting the material itself. This is clearly not too accurate to the reference or what we're going for. We got these guys on the side here. So it's just an extra step. It's really not the end of the world. I noticed we missed some stuff. But yeah, just totally not the most ideal scenario. We missed down here, I think, and here. Yep. So there's that. Where else did we have screws? I don't think it was too many places on this. There's this, which is a pretty tiny detail. And then it might just be these guys left. So right there, and then like these are such minor details, like if I left this it probably wouldn't even be noticed, but I mean we have noticed them, so we might as well fix them up, right? And I do think that is it. Okay, so we can start actually building up this material. We'll do it like we always do, where we kind of work our way up. Starting with the metal itself. Just kind of a standard brushed metal. Can turn the tiling up a little bit maybe to get some more of this pattern. And as far as the metal goes, there really isn't too much we can do with it other than maybe turn the roughness up a bit. The color, just here to give it that yellowish tinge, but even so I think I might make it a bit rougher. And the yellow can be a little bit yellower. Then we get our sort of bump variation. It's giving us this sort of grainy look. Let's see if we can mess with this a little bit more. Maybe turn it up. Have these parts be a lot rougher. Seems to match the reference this way. And then in that case I want to also kind of mess with the opacity a bit. Just seemed a little too sort of yellowy. Let's make it a bit warmer. I think maybe the height might be a little too much. And then I might even go into the noise itself and turn the balance down. Just something like this seems a little bit more akin to the reference. Occlusion dirt, this is going to be an important one. So we're essentially just recreating the last material, so there isn't too much to really comment on here. I'm going to turn the grunge amount up just because I don't want it to be too uniform. So we're kind of getting these effects, but it's just a little too powerful, and I don't want the dirt to be so like black. It almost kind of looks like oil buildup. So let's lighten it a little bit. That's a little too saturated. Okay. The rust is going to be something we're really going to need. It's kind of one of the main parts of the reference. First I'm going to get rid of this mask, or the paint layer on the mask rather, because it's for a different UV set. It's not going to apply here. And we can just sort of affect this and see if we can find a kind of good starting ground for painting a lot of this in. And this doesn't seem to be half bad. I like how it's building up around the edges. Kind of just want to tone it down a bit. And we can go ahead and I just want to see what these other guys are doing before I start painting. Yeah, this is kind of like our main rest. Let's go to paint. Let's go to brushes. Of course, we're going to be busting out our favorite mold brush, turning this guy pretty low, and keeping an eye on our reference and really sort of painting in these details the way that they're set up. So I'm going to start by kind of pulling a lot of this back, but I'm never really working in like completely black or white values unless I'm really starting to target something. But just kind of mimicking this kind of curve around the side. And I'm starting to notice that our color values are quite a bit off, but we can fix that up pretty easily. So I'm not too worried. This is just mostly the placement here. So don't want to go too overboard with it. This kind of metal does tend to rust pretty easily. So even having a light value on everything isn't too out of the question, but it's just this over uniform look that looks kind of auto-generated and novice and sloppy, right? Clean up down here. I know not a lot of people are ever going to really take the time to look down there, but it's all the little things that sort of stack up, right? Maybe to get a better feel as to what we're doing, I'm going to try and match this a little bit more by bringing back some of this green value. Turning the contrast down. It's definitely more of like a brighter green. And then we're going to have to really pump this yellow. Trying to get that. I also think we're going to have to rough it up a little bit. Trying to get a similar sheen. Color might be a little too much. In fact, you know what I think it is? I think it's just the fact that it's a solid color. That's what's making it a little too obvious. I think if we add a mask to it and add a fill, what we can then do is give like a grunge texture to it, and then this can sort of randomize how much yellow is being added. Something like this. So we're still getting some of these clear parts coming through. Yeah, something like that. See how we're still getting some of the main silver through, and it's a lot more variety of color. I think that's helping it quite a bit. And then even then I might turn it down a little bit. And that's doing a much better job. Okay, let's get back to painting this rust, and I might even affect it a little bit as well. Darker, more saturated. Giving ourselves kind of like a medium value and just painting it in around the bolts. I just don't want to go too far with the damage. I might turn down the bump. It's got some nice caked on looks here. Kind of have the rust crawling up. Kind of like having this linear scratch across. I just don't know if it's too kind of like on the nose about everything. Let's start to pull a lot of this back. This part doesn't seem to have a lot of this rust, like at all. So I'm just going to turn the value to pretty much black and just kind of get the odd scuff in there. I don't want anything that looks like it's wrapping around the edges very procedurally. It's a little bit too obvious. We'll have to do some work on this, but like stuff like that, I don't mind. I don't mind a little bit, but same with this. A little too much. Okay, like these are turning out nice. Just gonna really pull back a lot of this stuff. I don't mind some in here. So I'm not going to be as harsh about that erasing. If there were to be rust on this guy, it would be in the middle here. And then we can turn it back down. Clear off some of that. I think what we'll end up doing is for the bumps, also going through and doing a mask and sort of painting out some areas. But as for this, I might just put some of this maybe right about there. Just a little bit. Touching it up a little bit, just it's kind of like a crevice in here, so it might naturally pile up in there. Okay, we can move back. This is a little just crazy. Same with this. We did not unmask those bolts, so we'll get to that in just a second. And then maybe have a little bit on the ends there. But yeah, let's go back to this mask. and get these guys out of here. Just changing this back to shape so we get a clean sort of way to mask this. The mold brush also messes with a couple other settings, so I'm just turning all the jitters down so we get a very consistent mask. And if I'm not mistaken, yep, we did mirror those guys. So we can get back to painting our rest. Switch back our mold brush. This area, we do have quite a bit in the reference, mostly hugging one of the sides. So I'm going to leave a little bit like that, but that's about it. Most of it I'm going to chop clean off. Especially this. It's just a little too crazy. Rather than have this one there, I think I might turn the value up a little bit and have some along the bottom. So these two are like connected a little bit. These back poles, or these poles in general, have some rust, but it's more very light. So I'm going to start by just straight up erasing a lot of this, if not all of it. Just kind of nuking what we have on here right now. And then we can go back and kind of give it a more proper treatment. So I'm going to use just a very like middle level effect and try and paint in some rust. Maybe a little bit higher. Some of these ends. Kind of like that for the end. And then go back to more of like a straight up mid-tone and just kind of dust everything with it. Yeah, we're getting some good variety on that. I still think that the color on this whole metal is a little whack. It's a lot to do with this yellow color, I think. Maybe if we take this grunge mask and turn it down, so we're getting some overall consistency. But the yellow is seems to be a bit much. Yeah, we'll have to do some kind of painting for that, but let's just sort of finish the layer we're on. All things considered, kind of like looking back and forth from the reference, we're really not too far off, and we're still, you know, not fully done all the layers yet. So let's clear up this guy. Make sure we're getting all the camera angles. So we're going to flip this. Like, I feel like these poles are coming out a lot nicer than some of those side parts were. And I think it's because the bumps kind of work better in these areas for some reason. Okay. We can do what we did before. Get kind of like a medium-high kind of strength. Just kind of paint some edge wear back in. Just gonna add some nice roughness variation. It's definitely a nice clash of colors, the green and the orange. Opposites on the color wheel. From here we can get like more of a mid-level and just sort of like before. I think dusting is kind of like the best term for it. Yeah, we still have a few parts to go. There's really no really no other way around this other than just sort of, you know, buckling up and getting it done, right? So I always feel strange not having a lot to commentate on, but there really isn't too much here other than just trying to get the mask done and sort of painting this area out. The next two layers that we have are still some kind of rust layers, so I think they'll help tie it all together a little bit more. But for now, this stuff is doing a pretty good job. We're getting this guy here. He does seem to have quite a bit more rust in the reference, so I'm going to give it a little bit more on the edges here. And yeah, I guess we haven't saved in a while, so let's let this do its thing, and then we'll continue along. Okay, let's sprinkle on a little bit more on these ends. And then go back to kind of this mid-level. Cut across with it. Turn it back up for the ends. It might be a little too powerful, so we can turn that down a bit. Yeah, still a few to go. Okay, we are frozen, and we're back. Okay, I'm always scared now because there's such a chance of this stuff crashing now. I really should be just saving after everything, but I'm so discouraged to do so because the save times are so long now. But it's even longer to kind of have to reboot everything, especially because when this crashes, it's because it's used up all my RAM, and those kind of reboots do take a little bit of time. So the smart move would probably be to just pretty much save. So bring some color back in. I don't mind adding a bit more here because we have these grooves that would kind of encourage the kind of generation of more grunge. Down here, this will be an interesting one. So we have a spring. The rest of this, though, should be pretty standard. So I just got to get rid of everything. These end ones seem a little bit more straightforward at least. And it's a bit more important to get these ones from the bottom because these are kind of like the only ones where we'll really get a clear view of the bottom. So just make sure you get it all the way around. Turn the values down a little bit. Fill in the middle. And then that kind of leaves the spring. I feel like the spring would get a nice, healthy, sort of consistent coating of it. And I'm starting to see how some of these scratches might be causing problems. And I'm going to actually turn this up a little bit. Spring would rust a lot quicker than like a thicker metal rod, right? So there has to be a noticeable difference between these two. That leaves these guys. You know, I'm also just noticing I could literally just black mask it out like this and then go back to the paintbrush, which probably would have been a lot faster for everything else. But that way it kind of gets rid of everything completely. I don't know if I necessarily like this better, but it does give us the opportunity to start from a completely blank slate. So let's just get these ends. This is a mirrored piece, so it's already being affected, which is really nice. Make sure we're giving it a nice consistent coating. Not sure if we did that. Yeah, we did that there. And then now we can do our more mid-tone values, kind of scrubbing across everything. The roughness and color variation. Okay, these guys probably gonna focus it around the bolts a little bit and the base, and then this smaller guy can just kind of have its own healthy share. So that'll do good for those guys. And then I think we just have three more of these poles along the middle. So we'll give them a visit. Yeah, I'm just going to pull back a lot on that. It seemed a little unnecessarily affected. I'm just trying to find more ways to kind of break up the color and where they would naturally sort of build up. I don't want a lot of big empty sort of slabs. Let's do the technique we did before where we just sort of nuke some of these parts, then we can just start building them up immediately. Which, yeah, it's probably just the better technique. So these areas, get the ends. I guess we don't want to get these rings totally infected with the rust. It's nice to kind of have a little bit of a breakup. These pieces would probably, you know, slip and slide around a little bit on their own, so they're not going to be totally affected the same way that the the parts beside it would be. And I'm really thinking this is looking pretty good. For the most part, we're getting the reference kind of more or less spot on. There's still definitely quite a bit we're going to have to tweak after this. Some color values, some height values. And then kind of just our quick additional add-on. It might also be useful to sort of jump into our other setup over there so we can get a good bottom view of everything, especially considering we have a lot of things that are from the bottom on this. So let's just get this last pull done and then we'll take a look at that just to make sure everything's kind of how we expect it and want it to be. Kind of like having the rust sort of branch out from this piece that's attached to it. I don't like how dark this is. I think if we're going to go for rust, it has to be a little bit more subtle on these pieces. Yeah, we can just sort of build it up a little bit like that. This is a little strong. I'm not sure what's going on there. And yeah, I think that's the poles kind of done. Let's get a bottom view of this stuff. Spring turned out pretty nice. Yeah, it all looks good to me. Except for this guy, a little too intense. I do like the idea of having some, but just a little more subtle. Same with kind of like the roof of this. Okay. That's why it's really important to kind of be able to have access to all the angles of your model with lighting on it. And then, yeah, this side. Gonna have to do a little bit of work on this. This little guy, I'm just gonna straight up clean. Same with this. Pretty much all these pieces. Yeah, the rust is just supposed to be a bit of an accent, right? So, tone all this back. We're missing a part from our main mask here. Let's go ahead and throw this guy back in. Get back to painting. And right, even more. Okay. This is why a color mask is a little bit more convenient, but you know, we're working with what we got. And it isn't too bad. Okay, clean up a little bit more. Could have sworn we masked these guys out, didn't we? Oh well, I guess we just gotta do it again, but it's kind of strange. Turning our jitters down so we get a consistent sort of stamp, and kind of just cutting these guys out as best as we can. Get back to the rest. Definitely missed an area here. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, that should be all the pieces. We might add more to this and then sort of deal with them as we go. But one thing I want to do is maybe mess with the occlusion dirt a little bit more. No, I think for the bump, we're going to have to do some adjustments here. I'm going to add a paint layer. Add the value to black, and we can kind of scrub out some areas to make them a lot cleaner. Which I think for spots like this is going to be pretty useful. Especially for the side, we can add quite a bit of shine and variation, right? If we want some spots to be super clean, we can do that, and then with the rust, we can sort of take it out as well. Give it kind of like a very contrasted look between these two. These two halves, I guess. Yeah, that's looking a lot nicer. Like the bump is doing a lot, but in some areas it's just maybe a little bit too much. Especially because we're also getting color variation when we sort of strip this away from parts. But it's really nice in some places like that, so I'm not going to strip it away too much. But I only want it where it really, you know, makes sense, right? It's only going to really build up in the more rusty parts. It seems pretty good on all the poles. I think I'm cool with them there. But I'm just trying to be a little bit careful with not overdoing it. And then yeah, this side is super uniform. It's just one chunk of like a very similar looking material. So let's start by adding some color around the bolt, around kind of the edges, kind of where it would build up here at the bottom. Turn the value up a little bit. kind of guide it to the end there, have it hug the bottom a bit. But let's say this area hasn't been affected as much, and we can just sort of keep rust away from there and paint out some of these bumps. And you can see how we can sort of layer these two guys in unison to get some pretty damn cool age effects, right? I kind of like having the middle part being a little bit balder, like hasn't fully been affected by any rust or anything yet. And then we'll use the rust kind of around the bolts to sort of continue that theme that we've been carrying on. And yeah, this metal at the bottom is kind of making me a little unhappy with all the scratches on it, so I'm just going to tile it a bit more. And of course, I'm just going to feel the need to kind of meticulously affect this and just sort of try and get the perfect look, but it's always impossible to do, right? These areas might be worth reinvestigating for the bump, but I honestly don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. We haven't saved in a while, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's go up to rust stain. This is looking like a lot more of a kind of heavy rust. Of course, we're going to be toning this one quite a bit back. The paint layer isn't going to affect us because it's from a different texture set. Drip intensity, I'm going to turn that down. I'm going to want this to be more spots. Rust spreading. It looks more natural that way. But I want the actual amount of rust to go down. Is there a way to do that? Rust spreading smoothness. I don't think we're going to get anything out of this specific rust stain, but we did have a very similar one on our frame texture set, some of these sort of like splotches. So let's go and dive into those. It is also really nice seeing this all come together. We'll definitely have to do some tweaking with the colors once we have everything done. But I'm going to go to the frame, and we had some sort of like surface splotches on kind of like the paint layer itself, so we can just sort of nab that and use it as a pretty good sort of first like foundational block, I guess. Metal frame, edge, bumps, fingerprints, sharpen. I think it was just rust spots. That sounds about right. We can copy that. We can dive back to the inside. Turn back off frame. We can paste that layer right here. I'm going to turn off that paint layer. And we can kind of mess with this, see if it's doing anything cool. It's kind of big. Might want to tile this a little bit more. I mean, it's just sort of adding like some general rust over everything. I do like these kind of little spots that it's added. I might want to tone it down a little bit. But it's just a little bit more variety, right? Maybe find a more optimal tiling amount. Yeah, we're seeing it pop up in a bunch of places, and it looks pretty good. I want to move on to rust occlusion. This is obviously going to be rust that's focused in corners. Once again, the paint layer isn't going to be accurate, so I'm just going to delete that. And let's see if we can get anything good out of this. I feel like it's probably just going right in here, but I am liking what it's doing here. And I think it's also populating in those crevices. Turn the grunge up. Yeah, mostly looking in here and here and seeing what it's doing, and I'm happy with it. I'm not going to mess with it too much. Sharpen, of course. It's going to crisp everything up a little bit. And like, we can literally affect these masks all day, but the thing is, we'll have to eventually get to a point where we're just sort of like, that's how it's going to be. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm just like, oh, I could just continue to adjust this and make it a little bit more rusty there, and then pull this back so there's more contrast between what's in front and what's behind. But the problem with that is we can essentially do this forever. I'm just trying to make sure we have some nice variation. We have no consistent like bald patches or spots where it's just the same over and over again. Adding rust where rust would naturally occur, kind of where two different pieces are intersecting, or maybe where a different type of metal is introduced. Crevices, corners. I think one thing we could fix is the color a little bit. Let's go back down here. Metal. I'm gonna make it a bit brighter. From there, we can add more color to it. It's a bit extreme. Like, according to the reference, like, it's correct, but there's just a lot more bald patches, so I think I'm literally just going to add a paint layer here and just, in some of these spots, just really get rid of the color. Maybe not completely black. But I just think overall it's a little too much. This is definitely an area we could make a lot cleaner. Yeah, I think just adding the the yellowness variation is gonna help make it feel a little less like auto-generated. So it's kind of like a mix of all these different layers, keeping the bumps and the rust together. This here, is this the occlusion rust? No, it's not. It's the main rust. I guess we just never painted it out very well. Yeah, I think like we can always come back to this and adjust it a million times over, but I think it's looking pretty good right about now. Let's continue along and then we can just sort of edit on top of it as we go. So I'm just going to call this metal aged. What is the next thing we should tackle? I'm thinking some plastic bits like this on the end. These wheels might be a good sort of next thing to do. For this, what I'm going to do is go to Smart Material, and I have a plastic Smart Material that I really like to use. It does a great job of sort of encapsulating like this sort of old, worn out plastic. It might even just be called plastic old if I remember correctly. But it is actually a plugin material that I downloaded. Yeah, plastic old. So I downloaded this off of Gumroad. I'll include a link to this in the included sort of file Word document. But this is really, really good. It does a great job of simulating like a really old plastic, and it has a ton of these layers that are just these masks of different types of grimes and leaks and spots and sun damage and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I even just sort of take, you know, this layer and apply it to things that aren't even plastic, just because I can delete the plastic on the bottom and I have this gigantic list of really nice and interesting wear. So the fact is we are working with plastic already, so this is just going to be good the way it is, but we are gonna of course have to mask out this stuff manually. So let's grab all of this. I'm really happy with how these ridges turned out actually. Same with this. I believe this is some kind of metal, if we can find a side reference. Yeah, so that is metal. This is this is metal as well here. Okay. So we are going to get that off of there. We have that plastic piece, and let's include this one as well. Okay, I don't know if there's any other plastic pieces we're going to be working on here. This is a really good reference for it though. But yeah, I don't think there is any more plastic like this, at least for now. Like we have this piece, but I think it's a little bit different. There's some other treatments we're gonna have to do for it. Wow, okay, I wasn't even recording that. I said this is the plastic that we're doing, and this middle plastic is slightly different. I think it'll be the same material, but I want to add some different things to it, so we'll keep them separate for now. So, as you can see, tons and tons and tons of stuff going on here. Strip this all the way down to the base, which is going to be kind of like a dark blue in a lot of ways. Desaturated. Roughness is up quite a bit. It's like there's a shine to it, but it's not overly apparent. Kind of along this color scheme. That's how it started. Base variation. So this is great. What we can do with this is just take this eyedropper and just select our base color and just sort of like turn the value up a little bit, and we literally just get some basic variation on it. It also affects the roughness, so we get this. So like immediately we already have a more interesting situation going on. And I might even, no, I'm not going to tint it. Old yellow shades. This isn't really something we're going to want. Like we might want to replace that with a dust, but I think we'll just get rid of it completely. Stains 01, kind of like an interior stain. Once again, we're not going to want it to be blue. We're going to want it to be kind of like a variation or grunge. So turn the roughness up for this. And kind of just mess with the balance a bit. I'm going to turn it down. Sun fade, this is going to be from the top. Just going to make it white, darken it, and lower the opacity. So some kind of variation. We can turn the balance up a bit. This one isn't really necessary, but I kind of think for this it's good as kind of like some caked on dust almost. Obviously this wouldn't really get a sun fade, so we can kind of emulate some kind of dust. Scratches is the next one. It's in its own group because it's got a lot going on. I think before that though I kind of want to just affect this base layer. Okay, let's just skip scratches for now. We're going to go to black spots. Just adding some random grunge again. Stains, just random splotches. Once again, we can use this as kind of like a dust or something if we turn it down really low. Leaking. This is a pretty important one because we can get some kind of targeted wear on this. If we turn the levels down. Turn the length down. And yeah, this is pretty good for using it as a kind of grime. Mud, this is going to help us a lot with sort of like a dusty, gunky, cornery look. Just affecting the level of it. And honestly, I'm not super happy with how this is turning out so far. Unless this dirt can really save it, but I'm kind of hesitant on that. For some reason there's a saturation slider that's turned way down. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's certainly not super good. Let's see if the other side turned out better. Like, it's very mediocre. It's very okay. I think we can do a lot better than this though, so I'm going to pretty much delete everything but the base and the base variation. There's got to be some better plastics that we can work from. Plastic glossy stained, grainy, scratched, matte, dusty plastic robot. I mean, you can try that. It sounds like it might have some good layers in there. I mean, some of the grunge seems to be okay. Let's see if we turn off this background layer. Obviously, we're not going to need it. We'll start with this. And I'm just going to build it up to try and have some dust caked in these corners here. AO, intensity, we can turn that up. Curvature. It's going to be how effective it is sort of hugging to the sides. Scratches, we don't need that position. It is sort of collecting on the bottom, which is kind of the opposite of what I want. Top intensity. Okay, we're going to turn on the bottom intensity and turn up the top intensity. Okay, now we're kind of getting something that we're looking for. Front intensity, which is going to be what's happening in here. I'm curious to see how it's affecting the other side. About the same. We'll manually paint in this area, to be honest. Right intensity, interesting. Scatter intensity. Yeah, I'm not going to affect that. So let's see what we can do here. The color is a little intense. Going to turn down the value quite a bit. From here, we're going to add a paint layer. Just kind of clean it out a little bit. Just wanted to feel a little less procedural, right? kind of having a gray value is going to add in dust as well as take away from some of the more intense places, so it's not the worst idea, especially for like in the middle. It's just going to even it out a bit. We're definitely going to want to check in on this side a bit more. It's looking pretty good. And then there's this layer, which I'm not quite sure exactly what it's doing. Roughness all the way up. Interesting. I'm going to get rid of that. And realistically, I'm just going to drop this layer down here. We can get rid of this dusty robot layer. Just going to call this dust. Kind of tone down some areas. I'll lower the saturation on the main layer, and I might even lower the roughness as well. Make it a bit shinier. So there's some more contrast here. So it's coming along, but it's just not matching the quality of everything else. I think I'm going to slap in this plastic gold again, and we'll sort of mix this dust with everything else. And I think that might be the key. Okay. Let's give this a crack again. So we can kill the base variations. Old yellow might be good to add a little color in there. Stains we could tone down. Make the color white. We're already getting more caked on effects, which is nice. Sun fade. It was good what we had going on before, so I'm going to continue it. Maybe a bit more of a warm dust color. Liking that a lot. Turn the roughness up because it's dust. Scratches. If I remember correctly, only one of these actually does anything. Yeah, pretty much just this one. So we can just use this as kind of like a chipped area. So let's just see what each mask does. Kind of just want to turn it all down a bit. Turn the contrast down a bit. And it's just going to be a very subtle kind of edge scuff. Okay, scratch rough. Grayscale scratch. Interesting. Is this supposed to be a scratch layer? It does not look like scratches to me. I'm going to change this to some other kind of scratch. I'll tile it a bit more so we can see these scratches. I very much like the idea of scratches in the plastic, actually. Let's invert it. So the scratches are white. Really not seeing any scratches on this thing. I guess if we turn it up, we see some. Oh, it's because the levels is going crazy on us, that's why. Probably turn the scale down then. It's like 5. Maybe 8. Or maybe we do want it crazy high. Let's just try like 15 or 10. Getting some kind of scratches in there. Wonder how the other side is looking. Yeah, it's not bad. What I'm going to do here is add some height. Have it kind of cut down a little bit. Just kind of lower the opacity on that. No, that looks really bad. Just being really obvious there. Yeah, let's let that save, and then we'll find a more appropriate scratch location. But it kind of seems like it's more coming together now. Okay, let's spin the wheel on this guy again. I guess we can take it off triplanar and just go back to UV projection, which will probably make it a bit easier. Also means we can scale it down a little bit. Yeah, it's subtle and nice. We can work with that. As for this side, there's a couple in there. This dust, is it this layer? No, that seems to be fine. Is it the sun fade? Yeah, I'm gonna turn that way down. It's a little silly. Same with these scratches. Okay, that's the scratches. We can go to black spots. Let's add some roughness. Let's really drop the opacity on it so we get some kind of difference. Stains. Random stains on it. We can probably increase the tiling a little bit. It's just layering on pretty much some some gunk at this point. Like this material is, it's definitely not perfect. I feel like it's not the greatest thing the more I think about it. This leaking is pretty good for some nice gunk in the middle, so I can actually like get something that kind of looks a bit more like targeted dirt and grime. It's mostly dust that would ever get in here, so I'm just going to make it a bit brighter like that. Maybe a little less saturated. Mud. Yeah, we really don't need this unless we're super lowering the opacity. And then just a dirt layer. So, apologies for kind of going through this whole thing twice, but yeah, so that's doing a better job of evening it out. The resolution here isn't crazy crisp or anything like that, so it's kind of hard to get exactly what we're going for. Overall, I'm happy with that. I would just like a little bit more specific dust in these cavities, so I might try and just make our own custom layer here. Let's just start with color. Let's get into our smart masks, and I'm just going to just specifically target, I believe that would be AO, if not curvature. So I'm going to type in occlusion strong, and I'm hoping it gets in these areas. Yeah, it does, but it gets in like this as well. So I'm going to add a paint layer, and we're just going to mask out this. I'm just going to straight up go to our polygon select, go to UV shell, and just completely get rid of those layers because we're really not concerned with them. I'm just trying to find something for this inner part. We can call this ring dust. We can give it a bit of a kind of effect like this. See if we can mess with the texture to maybe break it up a little bit. Yeah, something like that is looking a little bit nicer. And then lower the opacity. That's really like pretty much exactly what I'm going for. Sweet. Of course, since this is dust, we're going to have to turn the roughness up quite a bit. Might make it a bit more red. Saturated a bit more. Nice. Went a little crazy on this side. Just gonna manually mask it out of this side though. I feel like it's easier to do so on this. And I feel like we might have to do that for quite a few things here in the plastic gold layer. Yeah, for example, the sun fade just looks bad on this part. So I'll add a paint layer. We can scrub that off. The stains layer looks pretty poor. But yeah, it really does look like a dusty old piece of plastic, right? Just stripping back some of this overdone stuff. Then we got this custom dust. The only thing I don't like about this is this kind of edge, which I believe is the where is that? Like the scratches on the edge? Stain, sunfade scratches. What is causing that then? It's the mud. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm really just going to strip back most of that. Okay, not bad. And then I might go back to our dust layer and kind of paint on there. Just to kind of add back some of the warmth and the roughness. Not bad, not bad. I'm going to turn down this dust ring and the actual dust itself. And then I think the only thing we're missing is just some kind of like white specks across everything. We've been doing it for pretty much everything else. So, white specks. For this, simply adding a black mask, a fill. I'm going to grab our favorite noise, the blue noise. Tile it at maybe 0.5, so it's a bit bigger. Turn the contrast up in the balance. Way down. Maybe you want to tile it by 0.65. Let's add a filter so it's not so dotty. Yeah, we'll run it through a warp to get these sort of random shapes that we've been doing. And from here, all we have to do is kind of drop the height by a little bit, turn the roughness up, and lower the opacity. Just some more random specks to kind of break things up a little bit. Very subtle. Yeah, I mostly wanted it for this side because there's this big open plane here. Height might be a bit intense. And I'm down to kind of adjust some of the tiling a little bit. Turn down the amount, and yeah, that's mostly what I'm going for. We have been recording for quite a while. I think I'll save and kind of call it here. We didn't get a ton done, but I mean, we did cover a solid chunk of this guy. I think what I will be doing is adjusting some of the values and masks a little bit. not changing any of the materials themselves, but just sort of blending things a little bit better to how the reference looks. And then even looking at the reference, I'm noticing there might be a few more parts that actually this metal should be a part of. So I'll just sort of get the metal ready. We'll continue that in the next part, and yeah, from there we'll continue on to a different part, maybe the big sort of plastic center area here, the sort of roller, or maybe finish all the small parts and sort of work our way up to the larger scale pieces. But either way, that'll be doing it for this part of the tutorial. Not too much left. I'd be surprised if this went more than like an additional 5 parts. I think that's kind of like my guesstimate for this. Who knows, give or take. But yeah, thank you guys for watching this part. Hopefully you enjoyed, hopefully you learned something. And yeah, definitely excited to be working again and starting fresh for like the final time. So we'll get this final texture set done, and the only thing left to do after that is rendering. So hope you're looking forward to it, and I'll see you in the next part. Peace.